I'm really excited to be here and to hear from the amazing women here at Blend. We're a software company. We partner with some of the world's largest financial institutions, and we make it easier for people to get loans.
My career at Blend has been a total whirlwind, full of ups and downs, total roller coaster, full of moments and memories where I've felt like the most qualified person in the room to when I felt like I could be fired tomorrow.
I spent the last year sitting in a conference room with a variety of people, taking our principles and making them into a narrative, and it's called our beliefs book.
When I interviewed with this team, I thought I saw those core values of mine reflected back at me, and that wasn't something I wanted to ignore.
I've been a manager at Blend now for about 2 years and did not previously think I wanted to be one. My manager told me multiple times to give it a shot, but I didn't believe in myself at the time. But I'm so grateful that I had someone that did.
Negotiate, negotiate, negotiate. All the studies show women just generally negotiate less. Please negotiate for your salary because it's expected.
You have changed jobs multiple times. Like, what have you done that's actually worked in your favor to actually figure out what you're getting yourself into?
Ask about the culture. You may get a lot of generic responses, but you've met so many people in your life and you get that gut instinct right away. See if that will lead you down the path.
How did you know if you wanted to be a people manager versus an individual contributor?
I actually just took it as a leap of faith, but you will never know unless you try.
The feeling I have on those days of accomplishment, hope, and growth, that feeling and that realization is one of the reasons I'm really excited to speak to all of you today.
We're hiring, so if you're interested in making a move, come talk to us. Start over. Hi, I'm Angie, founder of Girl Geek X, and welcome to Girl Geek Dinner at Blend. I'm really excited to be here. I've always walked by on Kearney and wondered what Blend was. So I'm really excited to be in the space and to hear from the amazing women here at Blend.
All right, I'm Gretchen. How many of you guys, this is your first Girl Geek Dinner? Oh, good amount. Okay, so we do these every single week at a different company, obviously. And we're also doing on Friday, which is International Women's Day. So if you haven't figured out a way to make your company buy you lunch, you have less than 48 hours to make that happen. And we're going to do an all-day virtual conference. It's going to be awesome. Like amazing topics, technical talks, things on intersectionality and systemic change, building high-performance teams, like all the stuff that you love from the Girl Geek dinners that we like personally curated. So it's like a Girl Geek dinner on steroids. So you definitely want to come, and there'll be video later. We also just released episode 5 of the new podcast, which is on... No, it's just like every channel. It's on mentoring or imposter syndrome or something. Anyway, there's like 5 of them now. And so check them out because we take stuff from the dinners and then we add our opinions, of which we have many, onto them. So they're kind of fun. And give us feedback too, because we've never done podcasts and they might totally suck. And it would be really cool if we learned that fast. All right, so we started doing this new thing. This will be the 2nd week, and who won last week cannot do it again. Okay, so if you have been to 5 Girl Geek dinners, raise your hand. 6, 7, 8. You can't win again. 9. All right, you win. You get Girl Geek socks. Hold on, I have them right here. Oh shit. Okay, wait. All right, we'll get the other one. We have more socks, but don't kill Angie on the way out for them. Okay, so we're so excited for this, especially the food. The dumplings were amazing. We ate them all. And so thank you for coming and enjoy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, clicker. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? I have something really exciting news to start with. There are 2 seats right up front. If you want to sit down, way up close, there's 2 seats and 1 there. So feel free to mingle around. My name is Laney, Erokan. I run internal communications here at Blend. We are thrilled to have you here this evening. And you're going to hear some really great stories from my lovely ladies up here who I get the pleasure of working with. If you don't know Blend, we're a software company that we partner with some of the world's largest financial institutions, like Wells Fargo and US Bank, and we make it easier for people to get loans. So that's Blend. I joined Blend 2 years ago this month. I wanted to come somewhere where I could build something special, and I was ready in my career to go to a place where I could build out what I was going to do. And I wanted to find out a way to help this really cool company work on their internal communications, and the opportunity was too good to pass up. I made some, some errors. I had some wins, but there was a really cool thing that I got to be a part of, which I think you only get to do when you're at a company of about this size. And I got to work with our executives and our founders on creating this cool book called our Beliefs Book. So when I joined, we had just rolled out our principles for the first time. The company was 4 years old. I was the 120th employee, and it just happened to get here right at that time. And they said, well, you know how to write, you know how to talk, let's take this and do something with it. So over the course of 2 years, we took our company principles and we refined them over and over, and we did that in a couple different ways. We took input from employees. We had focus groups. I had a Slack channel called Principles where you could drop in ideas or articles, and you could create, and then a web form where you could put, any suggestions you might have about our principles and how we work together. And every quarter, I sat down with our founders, and we reviewed the changes, and we implemented them, or we said, we'll work on this. And it was a really cool process. And then last year, they said, let's make this a book. So I spent the last year sitting in a conference room with a variety of people, taking our principles and making them into a narrative. And it's called our Beliefs Book. And it was a really cool opportunity that if I was at a much bigger company, I wouldn't have been able to touch them because they would have been written in stone on a wall somewhere. And I got this really cool opportunity. So that's cool things that we get to do here at Blend. Anyways, this is a great place to be. It's a great place to work. You're going to meet some of my favorite women tonight. A quick housekeeping note. We would love for you to ask questions, but I ask that you hold them to the end. We're going to have microphone runners and all of that at the end, but please hold them until all 4 people are done speaking. And that's it. So on with the show. I would like to introduce our first speaker, product manager Priya Nakra, to share some experiences from the many different hats she's worn here at Blend.
Awesome. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. Awesome. Great. Cool. Thank you. Okay, so when I was first asked to speak at this event, and by the way, I think other people are starting like that, but since I'm first, just pretend I trademarked it. When I was first asked to speak at tonight's event, I was shocked and honored, but also incredibly terrified. And not incredibly terrified in like the typical sense, like, oh, I'm scared to talk in front of a big group of people, but more like terrified that on this panel of illustrious women, I would definitely be the speaker who was definitively less qualified. And that's the thing about imposter syndrome, is that it hits you the hardest when the proof is literally right in front of you that you don't need to feel like an imposter. But still, it retains, it persists, and it haunts you. Between this and having to write a blog post for the Blend website, shameless plug, it goes up next week, I even asked our content and marketing team, I said, isn't this too much? Isn't this too much me talking about myself and my career? Aren't people going to think I'm really full of myself? And I asked myself, why am I doing this? I mean, aren't I opening myself up for scrutiny that I don't really want? Isn't everyone going to realize I don't deserve to be here and that I'm a fraud? So my career at Blend has been a total whirlwind, full of ups and downs, total roller coaster, full of moments and memories where I've felt like the most qualified person in the room to when I felt like I could be fired tomorrow, all in a day, by the way. There are days when it feels like success just means survival, just getting through the day. There are days where success means winning the competition and exceeding your own expectations. Then there are days when you realize how much you've grown, how much you've learned, and proven to yourself that you are capable and worthy. Those are the days when I remind myself of where I started here at Blend. The feeling I have on those days of accomplishment and hope and growth, that feeling and that realization is one of the reasons I'm really excited to speak to all of you today. So, how many of you have ever heard this phrase by show of hands? Anyone? How many of you have told yourself this phrase? Cool. Something in common. See that? Shared interest here. Okay, so it took me a while to understand, but being called technical is a spectrum. It means completely different things to completely different people all across industries. I had taken coding classes in school because my major was industrial engineering, but when I went to my first job in corporate consulting, you were either marked as functional or technical. There wasn't really anything in between. I was told by my manager several times that if I wasn't learning how to code or actively with the engineers looking at code and debugging things or drawing systems architecture diagrams for our customers, I wasn't technical. And after 4.5 years on the functional project management track, it was too late to try and be technical. And that's what I told myself when I joined Blend as well. But much to my initial chagrin and eventual appreciation, the deployment lead job that I took at Blend almost 2 years ago led me to our largest enterprise customer, which is Wells Fargo, who also happen to have the most complex and antiquated integration points. So I didn't really have a choice but to at least learn the basics of how Blend could talk to other systems and their architecture in general. So I started with the bare minimum, understanding what systems Wells had, what systems we had, how we pass data from one system to another in order to support the process of the cycle of a loan. Then I dabbled a little bit into error handling, alerting and monitoring, debugging some critical issues. It was essentially the equivalent of me tepidly dipping my toes into the really vast sea that is the technical world. It was at this time and during this project that our head of technical integrations, Ursula Alsenia, who's also our only female engineering group lead, she and I were sharing a glass of wine in sunny Des Moines, Iowa when we were at the Wells Fargo office, and we kind of realized that we had these really symbiotic complementary strengths, right? She had a team of integration engineers who needed a lot of structure, and I could provide that with my functional project management, and in turn I could learn a lot about what it means to manage technical products. So it was because of this and because of where Blend was as a company, she and I sort of created together this enterprise integrations program manager role where I could, again, learn more about being technical and also provide a lot of structure for her engineers. So I'm extremely grateful that she took a chance on me on this and sort of elevated me to the next level. So as the program manager for Blend's enterprise integrations, I was managing all of our productized integrations with loan origination systems and CRMs, as well as managing any custom requests. I know this is really riveting, bear with me. It was the first time I had any experience managing a technical project, but I really did rely on my functional experience to provide some structure to the engineers. So things like helping them with capacity planning, getting better requirements on their tasks, as well as fielding any questions from customers and customer-facing teams so that they could focus on the actual code and development. During the initial stages of the role, I was pretty consistently overwhelmed every time I had to get on the phone or talk to a customer or partner and explain to them what it was like to build against our APIs and all the requirements that they needed. I was pretty well prepared. I was doing my research on the side. I made a running list of engineering terms and added to it every time I heard a new one. Still haven't quite figured out polymorphism. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Stack Overflow and Techopedia became my best friends and confidants. But in the real-time pressure of talking to engineers who at least acted like they knew more than I did, it was really easy for me to doubt myself and shut down a bit, throwing all my confidence I had in my skills at the window. So it was at this time, I again had a really lucky opportunity to work for Kelly Scott, who is our head of services and support. She runs our professional services division. And she was the perfect manager for me at the time because for every customer conversation that went awry or any bad experience I had with an engineer that made me feel less than, Kelly was always there to illustrate to me that I was capable and that really I just needed to focus on those muscles that I hadn't been flexing before. So muscles like empathy for the end users and the developers who were building against our APIs, the folks who I was interacting with when we were building these tools, and also a keen eye on business process optimization. And most importantly, the muscle she encouraged me to flex was patience and empathy for myself. I remember a moment when, during a particularly horrible partner call, after I admitted to the engineer on the phone that I'm not an engineer and don't have quick access to the code, he stopped talking to me, calling me essentially a useless middleman, refused to speak to me any longer, demanded to speak to one of the engineers on my team. I was crushed, understandably. All this hard work had kind of come to a halt. But with Kelly's help and mentorship and the lessons that she gave me, I put myself in the shoes of this particular engineer who himself was on the hook for delivering something to his boss. And I also gave myself the time and the patience to ramp up on concepts I hadn't been familiar with. So hopefully the pattern is becoming clear in my career that with every new opportunity, every open door, I had a chance to learn something and push myself out of my comfort zone and prove my capabilities to other people, and most importantly, myself. As I started gaining more confidence in the program manager role for integrations around Q3 of 2018, Blend's first female product lead, Blair Martin, also joined the company, and she managed all integrations-related product builds. I remember even the first time we met, and I walked her through what I did on a day-to-day basis, how many customers I was the main point of contact for, how many integration patterns we scaled from one to many customers. And even in that first meeting, just that first interaction, she said, "You're already doing the job of a product manager. Why aren't you one?" I remember being really surprised, but also quietly validated. The term product manager is a highly coveted position in the tech industry. In the back of my mind, I always wondered, could I be a good PM? But surprise, surprise, didn't have the confidence to actually campaign for that position. I also told myself it was a far departure from what I was doing. I, again, wasn't technical enough, didn't have the engineering resources or the chops, had never shipped a product. The excuses were endless, as were the reasons to doubt myself. But between Blair's product management leadership and her passion for growing PMs, especially new PMs, and the work I had already done, managing multiple integrations and creating tooling and processes for other engineering teams to leverage, it became clear that the next step for me was to make my case to join the product team officially. And with Blair's help and the consistent advocacy from people like Kelly, Ursel, and other folks in the engineering and product org, I was able to step into the PM role officially in September of last year. And since then, I've been able to launch internal and external tools and truly build products that were API first. During my career at Blend, I've been incredibly lucky to find a circle of women who empower me and believe in me, even and especially when I don't believe in myself. This feeling and realization is also one of the reasons I volunteered to be the chair of our employee resource group, Women at Blend. I realized if it hadn't been for the people at Blend, and primarily the women at Blend who believed in me during my time here, I wouldn't be in the position I'm at today. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity to grow exponentially throughout my career. So this made me really want to create these opportunities for other women at Blend. And starting ERG-led initiatives like cross-functional development and mentorship sessions, I hope that I was able to help other women in Blend find another person or another circle to empower them. And at the risk of sounding basic AF, the power of a girl squad is real, and I wouldn't be here without mine. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Priya. I love that story. Our next speaker is Sales Engineering Manager, Ashley McIntyre, and she's going to take you through how she defined her career path and some counterintuitive lessons she learned along the way.
Thank you, Laney. I'm nervous. So, as I started preparing and really thinking about this event, and once we got the marketing material out there, and I sent the Eventbrite link to a couple friends in the last 2 days, because I didn't want to advertise it too much, lest they make me too nervous. I kept coming back to what I had helped write in the description, which was Ashley's going to talk to you about how to be what you, or how to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. And then I realized I actually have no idea how to answer that question. Maybe I signed up for the wrong thing. The last time I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, I was 5, and I wanted to be an engineer. Sorry, not an engineer. I became an engineer, but I wanted to be an astronaut. And how do you tell that face that she's not actually going to know what she wants to be when she grows up, but it's going to be okay? Well, kind of jumped to the end there. I don't know what I want to be, and I have never had a dream job that I've been aiming towards as I go towards this path. And I realize that a lot of times people come to events like this and you hear these amazing stories of all the successes people have had, but it's hard to relate to those, and it's hard to say, oh yeah, I can probably get there one day. And so when I thought about this question and what I wanted to talk about, I realized that it might be more interesting for you all to hear about all of the no's. And when I look at what actually ended up stringing my career path together, it is those no's that had a profound and positive impact on me, but I didn't realize that at the time. So I want to share a couple stories with you all tonight about what that means and how I got here. So to go back, my final year in college, I was coming out of an engineering degree at Berkeley, and I couldn't get a job. I went through on-campus recruiting along with all of my peers, and especially in that fall semester when you've got all of the big companies who are hiring, I was in all of those meetings. I went to the career fairs. These jobs sounded amazing, but I applied for all of them, and I got one call back, for which I went to one interview, for which I got 0 response. I didn't even get a no. To the recruiters in the room, when you say no and actually formally end that relationship, it is so much better than you never getting back to us, I can tell you that. And that was hard. It raised a lot of questions for me as my peers were going into their spring semester with a job, and I was trying to figure out if I'd ever be able to live in San Francisco and move across the bay and achieve this dream. And that question of, am I capable? Do I have a path? I'm standing here at the edge of this cliff. What's going to happen when I jump off in May? Was really hard to answer. So I get to the very end, I get to April, I'm graduating in May, and I end up taking the only job for which I got an offer. Hey, at least it was money. And what that job was is I was commuting from Berkeley to San Francisco for a 6 a.m. shift to cold call people in New York and Pennsylvania who would hang up on me if I couldn't articulate myself in 45 seconds or less. But what that job turned into was something I never thought, especially at that time, that I'd be able to achieve, which was I ended up running one of the largest, most complex projects at that consulting company. And a funny little side story on that is when I ultimately did decide to leave and I told that client that I was leaving, they'd actually almost forgotten that I didn't work for them, that I worked for the consulting company, and they tried to hire me on the spot. We just heard about Priya's experience with imposter syndrome. That's one of the things, honestly, that I think back on when I feel that, which is still daily today, which is I had a company that I didn't even work for try to hire me because they didn't want to lose me. And sometimes you need those boosts, especially when you're coming from a job paying you $40,000 and you're barely making a living to live in the city. So how did I get there? When I got to the consulting company, I leaned in, I worked hard. I did a lot of extra work, and I made sure people knew Ashley's name. I really tried to do that by traveling and spending time in other offices. And as I started working my way through the ranks, people started saying yes to me. There wasn't that silence, there wasn't that no. There was people who wanted to invest in my path. And for me, that was one of the things that stands out as my first piece of counterintuitive career advice, which is sometimes it's better to stay than it is to go. A lot of times you see people who are moving around from companies. There's so many cool tech companies in the Bay Area, and people tend to job hop a lot of times maybe to increase their salary. But if you've got a company that's investing in you, you're never better set up for success than you will be with the rapport and the trust that you've built with them. Don't underestimate those opportunities if they've shown that they're willing to do that, because every company is going to have their issues, but in those 4.5 years, I rose to a level that I didn't predict that I'd ever have been able to, and I don't think I would have gotten those chances coming in without a record of trust. But coming out after that time, there did come a time when I wasn't as excited about my path upward anymore, and so then I said no to the company. I decided it was time to look for my next job. What I didn't realize was that it was going to be back at the edge of that cliff, another demoralizing 7 months before I started that next job, where I was sending out cover letters and resumes after my full-time job, getting no responses. I had no idea if people were going to hire me for a job that I didn't have. Because I was successful in my current role, but I wanted to move to something else that wasn't defined at that time, and nobody would even call me back for that. And where I struggled with that is I didn't know how I was going to get my in. And that came to my second piece of counterintuitive advice, which is sometimes that close work friend or your work wife leaving to go to another company can be one of the best things for you, because that network may bring you onto that next challenge or that next role. And that ended up being how I got that next role. I'd sat down and started thinking about what I loved about my day-to-day job, and I found that my planning sessions with my customer at the end of each year, where we'd talk about the next contract, educating them as to the vision and how we could actually deploy these features and these products that they could use, was one of my favorite things to do. And that, to me, started pointing me towards sales engineering, sitting at the crossroads of people and technology. And then when my friend reached out about the open sales engineer role, I went in there. I was so excited. And I think both that warm referral and my interest helped lead me to get that job. And then that company said yes to me. So I started at that job. And a similar story here. I leaned in, I worked hard, and I started seeing success. A year and a half in, I was gaining traction. I was put in a leadership role, and I was going to have the opportunity to build a team for the first time, which I was so nervous about, but excited about. And then one day, I made a mistake. I made a huge mistake that ended up losing the trust of my colleagues, and it ended up costing me my job. My company was going through some layoffs at that time, and my mistake caused them to say, you know what? You're no longer a part of this team. What have I done? The questions immediately sprung up. The shame, the embarrassment, the confusion. Can I do this? Am I following a path? Did they just blow the bridge in front of me? What have I done, and how am I going to get through this? If anybody knows that feeling in the pit of your stomach after a breakup, when you hear your former partner's first name and that knot opens up into a bottomless pit, that's what it felt like for about a week. It was not pretty. I was scared. I did a lot of crying, and I was really ashamed. It was really hard telling people that I actually had a role in this, and I was really upset with myself. But then one day, about a week later, I woke up and realized I'll be fine. I'm not going to let this be the reason that I say no to myself. I'm not going to cut off my own path here, and I'm not going to let this lapse in judgment but learning experience stop me from continuing to learn from it. So what I realized in that time, and as I move forward, is I realized that this time I actually had all the time in the world to find my next job, to find the next right thing. And so that's what I started doing. I sat down and I thought, and a couple things started coming to mind. The first was that I needed to capitalize on a job that had both combination of strengths and my interests, where when it played to those things, I knew that I would be the most successful, so I wanted to hone in on those roles. The second was, even though I don't think I am sometimes, I'm pretty darn smart and capable, but my resume and my profile may not be what the sexiest, highest valuation tech companies or the biggest brand names actually want. And you know what? That's okay. Ultimately, I feel more at home as a big fish in a small pond rather than the other way around. And realizing that and really embodying it was one of the first times I actually felt the power of that, because I kept judging myself when friends would talk about the coolest companies that they're at. But really, that didn't mean they necessarily liked the culture of that company or felt motivated or felt that they were in a place that they could grow, but they just had the brand name. And I realized that that wasn't going to be enough for me. I realized every time I saw rejection come up, it was quick to follow when I was focusing on other people's strengths, so I needed to focus back on my own. Ultimately, the challenges best suited to me were the ones in the environments where I was happiest, and so I started using those things as my guiding star throughout this job hunt. And that's not to say that that job hunt was easy either. There was 35 conversations that I had over 2 months as I tried to really expand my network and give it a chance. And then one day I found Blend. And I've been here for about 2 years now, which is crazy to me, because as I look back at my opportunities here, I came in as an individual contributor on a small team of 2 people. And Blend gave me a chance as a new manager last January, and I now have a team of 6 that report up to me. And I'm learning these new challenges as a new people manager, but also in a growing company that you've heard a little bit about here. And the reason that I came here was not because I thought Blend had a chance of being a name brand. It wasn't for any reason other than when I interviewed with this team, I thought I saw those core values of mine reflected back at me. And that wasn't something I wanted to ignore. I leaned in, and even though each time I left the interview process asking, is mortgage even interesting? Do I want to do this for another 5 years? Because that's what I wanted. I wanted to go somewhere where I could be there for 5 years. And ultimately, even though I wasn't sure if everything was going to be perfect, those values and the people were what I knew I needed to invest in this time around. Which brings us here. So, in summary, I wanted to go back to the woman standing at the edge of the cliff when she was leaving college and not sure what she was going to do. And if I had to summarize a couple things for her to take with her on this journey from what I've learned, what I'd try to say, though I honestly don't think she'd listen to me, knowing her insecurities as well as I do. The 3 things are, there are benefits to be had personally and professionally to grinding it out at a company for a few years, getting a lot of experience, taking roles that you didn't think you would take when you first started that job. Invest in those companies when you can, because they're investing in you. Second is embrace every no along the way and cherish those yeses. When you hear the yeses, celebrate them and keep working your ass off. And third, just because you may not feel like you have a path today, you may not have a dream job, you may not know where you are in your journey, doesn't mean that somebody won't one day ask you to get up in front of a large group and have you fail miserably at answering the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, so much. And I'm so glad you said yes to Blend. All right. Now Next up, I'd like to bring up our product design manager, Eunice No, who not only is going to talk to you about her career choices that she's made along the way, but she also was the third woman hired at Blend, and I think that's really cool. So about 4 years ago, she joined the company, and she's learned a lot in the meantime. So here we go.
She's going to help me progress my slides for me because I have notes in my hand. Well, I'm grateful to be able to be up here sharing my story. Honestly, if you asked me 10 years ago if I would be up here and have the opportunity to speak to all of you, I would not have thought this would be a reality. So thank you all for being here. Different from Ashley, from a young age, I knew I wanted to be a designer. I probably did not know what that actually entailed. And one of my school assignments in middle school, and I'm not sure if any of you had this as well, was to write a letter to your future self. And that letter would actually be mailed to you after you graduated high school. And when I received mine after I graduated, I'd completely forgotten what I had written and was pretty surprised that I said I wanted to be a designer. Not pretty surprised that I wanted to have 2 dogs. So 2 out of 3 so far, working on the second dog, trying to convince my fiance right now to get one. He's not down. But you know, one of the things that stuck out to me in that letter was the last thing I wrote to myself, which was, don't be too hard on yourself. I think I was a pretty wise kid, actually. But I know it made me realize that I struggled with self-criticism at a very early age. And when I was preparing for this talk, there's about 4 moments in my life that stood out that I realized that the common thread in each and every moment was that I was really out of my comfort zone while still struggling with self-doubt and self-criticism. The first one I'm sure most of us have gone through is going to college. There were a lot of thoughts leading up to that day, that first day. Am I going to like my roommate that I'm sharing a boxed room with? Am I going to make any new friends? How am I going to do this without my parents? Am I majoring in the right thing? And so on. And I was really nervous and scared already to start this venture. So this is, actually go to the next one, sorry. And this is a photo I actually found on my Facebook that while I was watching the news with my dad before starting college, it said top 5 useless majors. And just to clarify, I majored in fine arts with an emphasis in graphic design at USC. So not only did I have 1, but I had 2 up there. So, you know, going into that, I was even more scared to start school. I really didn't want to mess it up. You know, school isn't cheap. I really didn't want to disappoint my parents. And so I definitely was in a little bit of a panic when I started. And reflecting back, I think I took a different, like, non-traditional path from most of my classmates and friends. During finals week, most of them were huddled in libraries studying for exams, and I was huddled in the studio with, like, paint all over my hands, trying to finish my final art project in time. And, you know, I think also, too, a lot of them were getting internships to secure their careers. And for me, I had, you know, it wasn't really that clear for me. Product design. How many people are designers out there in the room? Ooh, okay, just a few. Yeah, let's stick together. But you know, I think product design hasn't been around for very long. It started in the 90s, but I mean, there's so many titles: UI, UX, interaction, web design, and it didn't really become well known until more recently. And also in school, there wasn't really a curriculum or a major that was really teaching us and this experience as well. And so I knew that I had a lot of work cut out for me to figure this out. I use internships mostly to figure out what I didn't like. So, you know, I actually had about 6 to 8 internships while I was in college. Anything from like fashion design, wedding event planning, and working for free for a lot of small startups. Yeah, when I was going to school, free internships was a very common thing for most of us. And it wasn't until I worked at a small startup as a web designer that I was really intrigued by the startup culture. So I started spending a lot of my nights, instead of going out partying, drawing mocks of fake websites that I would come up with. So I definitely don't want to share with you those concepts that I actually worked on. But after that, finally after my junior year, I heard about this new incubator program in New York that was hosted by General Electric and OMD, which is a small, it's not a small, an advertising agency. It's a 10-week immersive program for 20 students who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs. And I thought it wouldn't hurt to apply, and I honestly did not think I was going to hear back from them at all. But I got selected. So I packed my bags, moved to New York for 3 months before my senior year. And again, so many self-doubting thoughts the entire time leading up to the program. I was a broke college student in New York. barely turned 21, and this was the first time I had to interact with anyone that was over the age of 35. And now that I'm older, 35 is very young. So, you know, I didn't know how to carry myself, what to wear, how to sound when talking because I thought my voice was too high, what to eat in front of them during lunch. I was honestly really nervous and frankly really scared. I woke up every day with butterflies in my stomach, but also this uncomfortable pit in my stomach. And, you know, there was only one other woman in the program with me out of 20. And so, you know, when I looked around and saw the men walking around, they had such confidence, you know, joking around with the execs, you know, like seeming to have a really great time and not afraid to show their personalities. And for me, I didn't even know if I deserved to be there. And at the end of the internship or the actual program, there was a demo day where you had to pitch your idea. And it was in front of a group of execs from GE and OMD. And one of the requirements was that everyone had to talk. So I wasn't going to get out of that. So my partner and I, before we were about to present, I threw up in the trash can outside of the room. So that was a really great start. And to be honest, I really don't remember how the presentation went because I'm pretty much sure I blacked out the entire time. But you know what? It was an exhilarating rush, and I knew that I loved what I had, and it was kind of a glimmer of hope for me that I deserved to be there. So I realized though that I had one more year in school. And I decided at that moment that I wanted to graduate early. Sorry, I keep missing the slide, sorry. And I knew I wanted to graduate early, so I did everything I can to make sure I graduated in one more semester. After I graduated, I joined an accelerator program that led me to receive a seed round for my startup. That gave us the stability to build out our business. We hired 2 engineers and moved to San Francisco, which is where we are today. And to be honest, I had a couple of years that I was in a very, very, very scrappy startup. So I'm sure a lot of those few folks out there have experienced this. I found myself, actually, like I missed a lot of Coachellas, a lot of Vegas trips, and the struggle was really real. And at the time, that was really important to me. And so I was really, really bummed out that I wasn't able to go on those trips. There was also a lot of really late nights till 4 a.m. But, you know, we were just figuring it out as we went. You know, I was working on handling customer service, designing the product, teaching myself how to code so that we could have a working website. And, you know, it was really hard to see if I was growing because we were learning on our own and everybody else that was around me was going through the same thing. And, you know, we were just honestly just a group of new grads with zero experience running a business, trying to run a business, and at the same time, still trying to figure out who we were outside of school. And, you know, we were fortunate enough that we started to do pretty well, started to grow the team, and we were profitable in 2 years. But at that point, I was exhausted mentally and physically. You know, at the time, too, design didn't really have a seat at the table, and I find myself fighting for the value and importance of design. And because I was the only designer, I felt like I was fighting for myself. And even though I co-founded the company as well, I started to doubt myself and I convinced myself that I wasn't right for the team and ended up deciding to leave the company. And I wanted to make an impact. So, you know, again, having that seat at the table, at the time I thought product management was the only way you were going to get that seat. So I started to look for jobs in product management without even really thinking about if that role was right for me. Reflecting back, I learned 2 things. First, PMing is very, very hard. So shout out to all the PMs out there. I really appreciate everything that you do. But second, I realized that now I was trying to make myself right for this role for the wrong reasons, and I wasn't happy. I really enjoyed the parts of product management that was more around the experience and design, and I thought if I just stuck it out that it would get better, but it didn't. So also in hindsight, the culture at that company felt the culture of the company felt like everybody was fending for themselves rather than working together. So about after 2 years, I thought it wouldn't hurt to look around and do what I loved, which was product design. And that's when I was fortunate enough to come here and work at Blend in the beginning of 2015. So I've been here for about 4 years now. And I remember on my onsite at Blend, I thought I totally bombed the interview, so I called my boyfriend being like, well, that was terrible. And I had already made up my mind that they weren't going to call me back, but I ended up getting the job. And when I joined, the company was still small. There was only about 30 people, and I was the first woman hire in all of the EPD, which is Engineering, Product, and Design team. And at first, it felt like everyone in this company really cared about what they were doing here in the mission, and it wasn't just a job for them. And honestly, that was truly intimidating and motivating at the same time, but I knew I had a lot to prove. People were taking so much time out of their day to onboard me and to make me feel part of the team, which is up here. This is actually a little bit further along when we're about 60 people. But part of that was requiring us to run meetings on our own and to lead discussions, and that was really scary for me. I was in fear every day that I was going to get fired, similar to Priya. I guess we're all in it together. But one of the things that we had every Thursday was to do a design review in front of the entire company. Every morning on Thursday, I would wake up sick to my stomach knowing that I had to present in front of 50 people, which is now I'm presenting in front of more of you. So this is, that I'm nervous. But speaking up in meetings was really hard for me. There is an analogy I like to use. I'm not sure if everyone feels this way, but when I'm on a plane and I like the window seat, I think the entire time on the plane wondering when am I going to use the bathroom. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go now. Should I wake up my neighbor? Am I going to get stuck in front of the beverage cart? And by the time I convince myself that I'm ready to go to the bathroom, they're like, seatbelts, please. And and you got to hold it for another 30 minutes. And it's not a good feeling. And it's really not. And I think that's similar in meetings, I work myself in my head and, I'm trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to say and making sure that what I say is not stupid. And should I talk now? Should I wait till the person's finishes talking? And a million other questions in my head. And by the time I get the confidence to actually say something, the meeting has ended. And everyone's already moving out of the room. And, it's very vulnerable. I was very, very, very vulnerable. And, luckily, different from many of the past companies I worked for, I had a great support system through my manager and I had an outlet to talk to a lot of women during our Blend Ladies Night Out. So, having people to help build that confidence and give you those light nudges and support from people around me. I've been a manager at Blend now for about 2 years and did not previously think I wanted to be one. I told myself that it wasn't for me, that I wanted to be an IC. And my manager really told me multiple times to give it a shot and that I would make a great manager and that I was the right person for the role. But I didn't believe in myself at the time, but I'm so grateful that I had someone that did. And I find it truly rewarding now to work with incredibly amazing, talented designers and see them grow. And as a manager today, I strive to be like my manager to give support and help build confidence for every single person on my team. And I've realized that building confidence differs per person, that being thrown into the deep end might not always be for everybody. I still struggle with self-criticism and self-doubt, and I know that it'll be something that I deal with for the rest of my life. It's really easy to be your own biggest critic, and when in the moment and working, but looking back at the past 10 years, I'm grateful for all the experiences and people that have been part of my journey that have shaped who I am today. And to end, if I were to write a letter to myself, my future self today, I think I would remind myself of a few things. First, you can't do it alone. You need to support one another. I see it time and time again, women being more harsh to other women, but it's a responsibility for us to support each other. Second, vulnerability is a strength and not a weakness. When you hear that voice of insecurity in your head, just tell them to shut up. Vulnerability might make us feel less confident, but I actually believe it's our greatest mark of confidence. Third, simply do what you love. We're fortunate enough to live in a world in the tech industry that people support, what you want to do and your actual, development as well. And fourth, I'll take from my 8th grade self, don't be so hard on yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Eunice. Oh, you can just give that to Crystal. All right. Well, I'm getting on a flight in a couple hours, and I'm definitely going to think twice about where I sit because I don't want to have to wake up my neighbor. So our final speaker of the evening is Crystal Sumner, who is our head of legal and compliance, and so she's going to come up and talk to you a bit about her career in the legal profession.
Hi, everyone.
super thrilled to be here tonight. And, you know, to start the same way that Priya did, when I was asked to speak to everyone tonight, Sarah came up to me and she was like, I really want you to say, you know, give the inspirational ending. She's like, you're one of two female execs at Blend, and I'm sure you have lots of words of wisdom for the people in the room. And maybe it had been a really long day, maybe another depressing news cycle, but I turned to her and I was like, can I just talk about why we're not there yet? And she was like, sure. And so I sat down and when I went to write this speech, and I was like, well, that's really, A, not very inspirational, and two, not very helpful. And so what I started thinking about were there was lots of things, basically where I grew up, the steps that I've taken, the mentors I've met, my support system, that I actually do think have helped me get to the place that I am today. And while I will always say there's still a ton of work for us to be doing to advance women and underrepresented minorities in the workplace, I think there's definitely some tools, very practical as a lawyer, that we could all have to help us progress in our career. So I grew up in Texas, and very traditional Texas. Big hair, big makeup. We're talking Dynasty, not the remake, like the 1980s Dynasty type Texas, where, again, makeup, hair, and women should know their place. And by that, I mean that you don't interrupt the men. The men are having conversations, and women should kind of sit in the corner and listen. And I think that type of environment can do one of two things. You can either, you know, mold to it, or you can completely reject it. And if anyone knows me today, they will know that I very quickly rejected it. And at a pretty early age, I mean, I was pretty much a terror as a child, but I remember telling my father's male friends that adults, you needed to earn my respect. I wasn't just automatically going to respect you. And so I remember seeing the little girl standing up to the Wall Street Bull, like that's how I remember feeling as a little girl, just because I felt very much like this wasn't who I was supposed to be. And so, you know, I put my head down, I studied hard, played sports, got a full ride. I was a first-generation college grad, set me up for success in being able to go to law school. But I still think back and I still tell my father that that experience really set me up for being successful in what is a very male-dominated field of both law and tech. Because very early on, I found my voice. And as, you know, I think people find it at different times and people can, you know, figure out the right ways to find their voice and express their opinion. But I do think finding your voice is so fundamental to being successful in the workplace because so many people are afraid, and I think that's totally natural, but that is what's going to kind of help build that foundation for success. So after leaving Texas, I ended up going to Berkeley. So talk about culture shock. I immediately ended up in Walnut Creek because I wanted fast food and malls and everything that felt like home. But I also very immediately found that this was kind of my vibe. Partially because at Berkeley, and this was one of the first years that there were actually more female law students than men, which was pretty awesome. And I was also finally surrounded by a bunch of smart, motivated, just kick-ass women who were leading the pack. And so while I learned a lot of things in law school about how to become a lawyer, kind of, the biggest thing that I found was my support system. And these women behind me, you know, originally it was talking about outlines, dates, you know, those types of things. But as soon as we graduated, and to this day, I texted them last night this picture, this is my system that I lean on. So whether we're talking about, should we take that next job? How should I have taken that feedback that really sounded gendered? You know, what do I do to my next step? Like, these are the people that I turn to. That doesn't mean, and you'll see my next part, that you won't have mentors, but I think having that group that, it could be men, women, whoever, that is the people that you can rely on. For the past 11 years, it's definitely been this, and I feel like I couldn't be where I am today without having this support system. And so, yeah, find your support system. So after I graduated, I actually went to a top law firm in California where, again, very similar to law school, 50-50. A lot of women entering just as much as the men. But I very quickly saw that while there was a lot of female associates, there was not a whole lot of female partners. In fact, out of a law firm of about 1,000, 10% of the partners were women, which seems pretty crazy. But I was like, well, you know, it takes a long time to be partner. Maybe it's like systematic that, you know, back from the old days, I'm sure it's going to change. So again, I kind of put my head down, found great mentors, a junior male partner, a senior female counsel who helped open doors and got me on some of the best cases. And then when it was time for me to find my next job, they were the references that helped me like in that next step. So again, this is my first job in corporate America, but I very quickly realized that finding your mentors and advocates could be whoever it is. That is really going to help open the door, not only for that job, but for your next position. And so after a couple of years, or kind of see, every 3 years I'd like to mix it up, I decided to go to a government startup, which sounds really weird because government and startup just aren't things that go together. But at the time, after the 2008 financial crisis, there was a new agency being started by this Harvard professor that I'd kind of heard of, Elizabeth Warren. And it was pretty cool because she was still there at the time before she ran for Senate. And when I applied and got the offer, I remember very distinctly my hiring manager at the time, which was Richard Cordray, who went on to lead the bureau, said, you know, your offer seems really low. I would really negotiate it. And I had never negotiated a salary because when you enter a law firm, it's just fixed, flat. Everyone makes the same thing. You don't have to worry about is someone making more or less. It's just everyone starts. So I was really proud of myself because I negotiated a $12,000 raise, like additional 12%, I think, at the time, or 10%. And I was one of those things where I was like, oh, I'm glad he gave me that advice. Like, why would I not do that? What was interesting, and again, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the whole mission of this is transparency and fairness in consumer finance. Fast forward a couple of years, everyone's salary is actually public, and you kind of hear rumblings when you started looking at people's salaries, like, this person, same year's experience, makes more. There actually was, and I love the Bureau, but there was an investigation, Office of Inspector General report, that showed that women and minorities had actually statistically been paid less at the Bureau. And they didn't find there was like a discriminatory intent, but it just went to show you that even at these government agencies that are really focused on protecting consumers and have kind of the right moral compass, you still had this disparity in pay. And so my takeaway was, negotiate, 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 and all the studies show it can be 20%, 30% less. Women and just generally negotiate less. And studies have also shown that you could be leaving up to $2 million on the table by failing to negotiate. And so it was so eye-opening to me, and ever since then, every job, I'm probably a huge pain in the ass because I essentially know in the back of my mind, I refuse to make that 80 cents to a dollar of my male colleague, and I'm going to push as hard as I can. I don't need to make more. I don't need to make more, but I definitely need to be equally paid to my male colleague. And so I just encourage everyone, when you're applying to negotiate, I tell every person on my team, I've had a couple that didn't negotiate as soon as they started, next time, please negotiate for your salary, because it's expected. So when I moved back to San Francisco, I was actually still working for the government, and I decided that instead of suing people, which is fun at times, I really wanted to build something. And so I went into tech, and you think San Francisco, super progressive, but you do realize that not all tech companies are created equal. And so I really wanted to identify companies that cared about culture, cared about diversity, belonging, and inclusion. And so I joined Blend similar to some of my other colleagues quite early, when it was about 50 people, but it was lovely because as soon as I started, they actually had around 60 people hired ahead of people, and at 100 or 200, they hired a diversity, belonging, and inclusion leader. And so I've worked at 2 tech companies, both actually who had a strong focus on this. And what I saw was that if you're not working at it and thinking about it, it's not actually going to get better. And that also, even in companies like that, there's still so much room for improvement. And so one of the things that I talk with the women here, and we're actually doing listening sessions, is how we hold each other accountable. And it shouldn't just be on women and underrepresented minorities to drive that path. It should be every person at the company, and especially the leaders of the company. And so I just want to encourage everyone, because I do think we're not there yet, to really use your position to drive influence and change to help make it a better workplace. And for me, I actually had really fortunate, unfortunate for this picture, an opportunity this year when a law firm, Paul Weiss, which is a very large international law firm, announced their partner class, which, as you can see, is 11 white men and a white woman. And I'm on a general counsel network thread that blew up. Because fast forward, it had been almost 10 years since I had started a law firm thinking, oh, the reason why there's 10% women is just because it was, back in the old days, there were women not starting, but no, 10 years later, nothing had changed. And what I did with 170 women and men general counsel was write a letter, it was talked about in the New York Times, talked about in law.com, that said, embrace diversity or lose our money. I have $500,000 in budget that I can spend, and if you law firms are not actually making this an effort, and not trying to make a more inclusive place to work, I don't need to work with you. So I've received probably 30 or 40 letters from law firms talking about what they're trying to do, but it was one of those fortunate and unique positions that I could be in and use this position to try and drive change, not only in my company, but also hopefully with all the other law firms that they're working. And it's one small area to drive change, but I think if everyone is using their position to try to do that, that we can try to make a difference here. So I'm out of breath because I've been talking all day, now another now. But I think what I just want to leave you with is we all have kind of a place and role in this, so drive towards that and hold the people that you're working with accountable. And I'm happy to answer questions as we wrap up.
Thank you, Crystal. That was awesome.
Hi. Hi. My name is Miriam. Thank you so much for all your stories and vulnerability. It was really relatable. I know it's not easy to get up in front of a group and just share vulnerabilities and stories where you haven't done great and awesome. So that's really helpful. But my question was actually kind of coming off the heels of Crystal's talk and how, equal pay day was, on the 8th, or was it? What, my days are off. But, I think there was a recent policy that got passed that on a Monday that companies that have 100 employees or more are now required to report to the EEOC gender and race pay, basically how much they pay all their employees based off of gender and race. So that was awesome and a great victory. But I was wondering, there are certain companies like BlackRock and others that have take this kind of incumbent on themselves to go ahead and take the data and analyze it and see where they're at as a company. Are there initiatives like that at Blend? And do you see more popping up? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation that we have had, and I think there's two different things that you can do in this space. One, we have very rigid bands that we look at to make sure that people that are in the same roles are being paid the same amount of money. I'm a lawyer, and so there's a lot of statistical reasons why larger companies actually have a better way of doing that, but it's something that I think as we're now hitting more the 350, 400, you have to have kind of the right data points and the right number of women and minorities across subsets to make sure that you can be assessing that there's actually equal pay being going on. But it's definitely something that as we've had listening sessions, and it's an ongoing conversation that we have had specifically because it's something that we care about. And I think, again, as we were as a smaller stage company, because you didn't, would have one person maybe in design and one person here, it was harder to do that. And so we kind of tried to make sure that we had bands, because I think that is the fairest way when you don't actually have a bunch of different people within a particular role. But it's something that I clearly am very passionate about. And it was very eye-opening when at the government, everyone was being, you could see literally every person's salary. And very clearly, there were people who just made drastically more, and it was very unclear as to why.
Would you say that white privilege has helped you in your career path? And if so, how?
I'm like, of course. I mean, oh, sorry. Do you think white privilege has helped you in your career path? And why? And I'm like, 100%. I definitely, I think that I would be completely missing the point to not understand that there is privilege associated with being a white woman. And so I wouldn't even just saying always as a white woman, and I didn't necessarily, I grew up in a very lower middle class family, but especially now as a wealthy white woman, it is something that I'm so cognizant of sometimes that and I think especially from where I grew up, that it's something that I definitely think has helped me in my career, and it makes me want to do more and give back, and also ensure that we're creating an even more inclusive and diverse environment at the place we work.
I would agree 100%. I'm incredibly lucky for that privilege, but I also have tried in the last many years to really recognize that, because if you look at all of the research and if you do all the reading on diversity and biases, nobody can really be bias-free, but when you start acknowledging them and working with them, that's when you can start combating a lot of the unconscious biases. And especially now as a manager, I am lucky that I do have the position to interview broad swaths of people. I coach people on my team, and I'm really trying to learn about them, and especially based on their backgrounds and all of the influences that put them where they are today, how I can help them get to their goals. And this is new for me in a leadership role, but it's something that I am committed to doing as I continue in my career, because I 100% ended up in a lot of these opportunities because of that, but that doesn't mean other people can't end up there as well.
Hello, Cherie McKinney. Hi, everybody. Thank you guys for your talk. So one thing that I wanted to talk about was, it's huge in the tech industry, intersectionality, right? So how do you address that not only in the meetings that you attend, but also with your teams? Because being leaders, you have to also push this message down to the other women that, look up to you in some respects. So how do you address that? So it's kind of twofold, like yourself and then within your team. How do you address intersectionality without being kind of overbearing, like I'm a woman, rah, 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 right?
I think there was some lack of clarity, but are you talking about the intersectionality in terms of both women and other, because, go ahead.
Yeah, so, okay, I guess I didn't clarify. Yeah. So intersectionality just in general, but also in the room with predominantly males. I mean, it's not a secret that all of us are in this tech industry, and it's still mostly male dominated. I recently switched careers. I came from like the IT background, so white male dominated. Like, it's kind of like been my life. And then now I'm in recruiting tech industry, same difference. So addressing it not only with the men that you work with, that your peers up and down, but then also the people that you lead, because that's probably more important. Because a lot of the work that we're doing now for diversity, equity, and inclusion probably won't affect us, but it'll affect the people that we're bringing up, our kids and our kids' kids, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that's more clear.
I think the short answer is, at least in my stage here, I'm still usually the only woman in the room. So it's not like, there aren't a ton of opportunities where you can, obviously if you're with other women and you're noticing that they're getting cut off, you would want to say, actually, can we let Eunice speak or Crystal speak or something like that. There's a lot of like techniques around how to be an ally to women in the workplace. But if you're the only woman in the room pretty consistently, it's hard to be like, especially like me, so someone who has imposter syndrome, I'm not going to be like, hey, can you stop talking until I can talk? I don't have the confidence for that. But I will say men have been really receptive sometimes, some men, not all men, but some men have been really receptive if you just like point something out, right? Like even in a Slack channel, like having a conversation with a male counterpart, but then having that male counterpart put it in a public channel that like, oh yeah, and we can do this too. And it's like, actually, I told you that idea. And then having like kind of calmly not calling them out, but being like, actually, we really would have appreciated if you gave me that credit or gave, some other woman that credit because that was the idea. Obviously, a lot of people are more receptive to it than others, but I would think it's just the small things about, because a lot of men in the workplace do want to understand how to be an ally, especially as when I was the chair of Women at Blend, the ERG group. We had a lot of men who were just like, quietly in the channels and wondering how they could be an ally and wanted to get those resources. So you kind of just have to find those champions and hope that those champions will kind of permeate that message across their kind of male circles as well. I don't know if that really answered your question, but that's just like one tactic that I use to kind of help promote intersectionality.
Yeah, and I would say that I'm one of two female execs on the executive team, so I take that kind of role quite seriously. And I remember there was a week or two in which I had a lot of women, and I think it just happened to come give me some feedback that I took to heart, and Jonathan, who's back there on the executive team as well, and I brought it up at the executive team, and it was like, we can do better. And what was so refreshing, again, I don't even know if we'd hired our head of product who's female at that time, so I might have been the only female in that room, was the number of men executives who echoed and talked about how we can improve as an executive team and be the leaders and examples of that. And so I think that, again, I always go by using the position that you have. It could be on the executive team, it could be on the manager level, as you indicated, to just try and surface if you're hearing messages, and also be pushing everyone to be better. And it's not for just women. Women are underrepresented minorities across the board.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'd add to is I'm used to being kind of the only woman in the room as well, and then that's slowly changing over time, but it's just continuing education, right? Like a lot of these people in the room don't even know those things that you feel, and when you kind of be vulnerable and explain those things, they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And I think it's, instead of getting really upset, like I used to be like that, where I'd be like, this is ridiculous, I'm being mansplained. But knowing that like we're part of the movement right now, like we aren't going to make change by complaining and kind of getting upset about it. That like it's because they need to be educated, and we need to continue to kind of remind people that the first time you say it is not going to click. Like we need to continue to kind of let people know about how you're feeling, because again, they're not trying, their intentions are not bad at the end of the day. If they were, they probably shouldn't be working there, that their intentions are good. And so if you just explain that and continue to educate, I think we'll start to see some changes.
Hi, thank you so much for your stories. I was wondering, how did you know if you wanted to be a people manager versus an individual contributor?
I can share a little bit more color with that story. I did not want to be one at all, and I had an opportunity here where the head of design had left, and the new head of design needed to fill the role and really wanted me to do that. To be honest, I think it took me just taking a chance and a leap that I knew I could always go back to being an IC. And I was just more concerned about my career. I was like, I want to grow myself. Like, I don't want to have to worry about anyone else. But to be honest, I've learned and grown so much more just being around other people who are even more talented than I am, and to be able to have them like look at me, to look at me for advice or feedback. And I actually just took it as a leap of faith, try it out and see if you don't like it, because you can always go back, and you can always do what you liked before, but you will never know unless you try.
I wanted to add to this because now that I've had a year plus in a people manager role, I have so much more context on what it is compared to what I thought it would be. And the one thing that I would love to share with you all is just there's no difference between, you can be a leader whether or not you are a manager with direct reports. And that's one of the biggest things that I would emphasize here, is that having direct reports and being a manager comes with both driving vision and leading a team and coaching them, but it comes with the responsibility to giving them the hard feedback. And when they're upset or when they don't feel that they're being paid equitably or something else, you're also dealing with that side of things. And understanding and knowing that you want to practice that and work on that with people is important before you jump into those positions, because I definitely thought a people manager role was just a leader role. I thought I was sort of the head of this pack, helping to set vision, but you don't necessarily plan for those other things. And thinking about that is really important, because people can still, and this is something I really like about Blend, is Crystal talked about those bands, and we look at individual contributors and managers differently, but they actually have scales that overlap, where it's possible for an individual contributor here at Blend to make more than a manager. And so we try to embrace leadership that actually fits the skill set and the role that you're playing, and the only way up doesn't have to be acquiring a team of direct reports. And so I'd say think about a lot of those things. Think about if you want to be coaching and managing people, and really, if they're unhappy and thinking about quitting, or if they want to raise, is that a conversation you want to have, or do you want to be a leader in another way? Those are some of the things that I've learned that have helped me give clarity on what it is and what it may not be.
Hi. I think Priya had talked a little bit about being at an early stage company and feeling like sometimes as part of your day you're just trying to survive the day. And I think part of that chaos, you can kind of get stuck in just trying to survive over and over and not taking a step back and thinking about your longer term career growth or what kind of skills you want to develop. And especially at early stage companies, there's not always that clear mentor or person who can be an advisor to you about continuing to grow your skills. So I was just wondering, sorry, not sure if you're really here. I was wondering if you could give some advice as to how you found your mentors as you navigated these jobs, especially at early stage companies where there isn't that clear mentor, or the company doesn't always put as much focus on like how can we develop you when everyone's in this survival mode, getting through the chaos.
Sure. The short answer is I got extremely lucky. Right place, right time. A lot of the times, especially when I first met Ursula and then Kelly and Blair, etc. When I joined Blend, they did set me up with a mentor who's an engineering manager now, and he is working for Ursula, and he's also been a really, really incredible mentor. I think, I don't know if this is going to help, but honestly, I never actively seeked mentorship. I kind of just worked hard at my job, and it presented me with a lot of opportunities to collaborate with other people. And I think the most consistent theme about my career has been, because I haven't been searching for those roles and searching for those mentors, I relied a lot on just executing really well. And again, it doesn't happen for everybody, but I personally just got really lucky that, I don't know why I keep saying lucky. I talked to Ashley about this before too. It's we both mentioned in our speech, we're yeah, we're so grateful that somebody took a chance on us. And that's kind of also self-deprecating in some way, but whatever, that's the thing. What was I saying? Something about mentorship. Yeah, so because I wasn't I don't think I was ever oh, I want Ursula to be my mentor. I want someone to be my mentor. It was more just I'm going to work really hard, ask a lot of questions, and then, again, because I demonstrated some sort of interest and also execution, and that I could be heads down and get the work done, I think that actually opened up a lot of opportunities for me, both at Blend and in my previous job. But yeah, structured mentorship is a really, really important thing for an early stage place. And I would say if you don't have that structured mentorship, just find someone else that you want to emulate. And it doesn't have to be a formal mentorship kind of thing, but just as you're seeing someone in meetings or having conversations in the hallway, and you're kind of man, that person's really knows what she's talking about, or has a very good way of communicating, that kind of just emulating that person and kind of having it be an official someone to look up to inside of the company.
And I also think that's where the external support system, to extent, there's a lot of women here that finding people who are navigating this at the same time. I was lucky in kind of earlier in my career to have mentors, but especially as I've become in this role, much less so. And so that group of women, I phone them, have coffee with them. We have mocktails all the time because they're often going through the same thing. And so while I do think people are very lucky, it's not always the case that you're going to find it within your job. So having some external resource for you to go to is, I think extremely helpful to help navigate often these difficult situations sometimes.
I think for me, before Blend, I didn't have anyone as a mentor, and I think a lot of people look at their manager as being the only person that can be your mentor. And I think for me, I'm fortunate now at Blend that I do have a great manager that is one of my biggest mentors in my life, but is finding just multiple people who can fill that. Sometimes it's not just one person who can do that for you, and I find that a lot of my peers are my mentors, the people that I'm working with every day. I'm just honestly lucky and grateful to be able to work with them, and it's finding a couple of things that you like in each person and kind of creating a Megatron of a mentor for yourself. And I think always people are looking for that one person to do it for you, and to be honest, that person probably doesn't exist or is a unicorn. So find those multiple people that you can lean on, and sometimes it's not someone who's in a manager position that can do that for you.
Hi, thank you so much for talking tonight. So you've all shared your stories about your various career paths and talked about culture at the various companies you've worked for. So my question is, if you see that you're working at a company where the culture is less than ideal, how do you decide whether to stay and try to change it from the inside, or to find a company that better reflects your values?
I had a mix of that at the second company that I talked about in my story. And that was my first role as a sales engineer. And as a sales engineer, you partner very closely with the sales team. And that company had your stereotypical bro-y white guy tech sales culture. And it was infuriating at times. For me, this is just a heuristic I use for myself, is when I was at the consulting company, as I said, there's always going to be detriments to being at a company. Nothing's going to be perfect. Things are going to frustrate you. But for me, as long as the pros outweighed the cons, and I saw opportunity, and it wasn't as if I was uncomfortable on a day-to-day basis. I was maybe just aggravated or frustrated, but I had other things I was excited about. Those are the ones that I wanted to lean into and invest in. But I think culture plays a huge role. If it starts getting into you're so stressed you start clenching your jaw and grinding your teeth again, or if you don't feel comfortable and accepted or included in that workplace and the quality of your work starts to suffer and you don't see the path upward, I think those are all incredibly valuable reasons to go. But weighing that impact on you is what I would recommend.
I'll say one last thing. Okay. I think the thing for me is like one of the things that I did was write down what's important for you first, like make it really clear about what you care about in a company, and don't, like, those are your principles, and don't stray from that, and don't make exceptions for it. I think it's really easy to, it's comfortable to stay at a company, but if you follow those things, I think it makes it really clear if you should stay or not. But I think also too, because I've worked at companies where the culture was, non-existent, to be honest, and I think you just have to remember, I think you just have to remember that, you're learning when things aren't going well either. Like, I think people like to think about that as like everything's going wrong, but you're learning what you don't like. And you're also learning like what you would like to do differently somewhere else. So take it as a learning experience, and sometimes sticking it out a little bit longer and seeing if things pan out, because it goes in waves. Startups especially, some 3 months, 6 months, things are not great. And 6 months later, things are going to be at a high, and that sometimes it's worth sticking it through. And, we both have been here for quite some time, a lot of us here, and there's been ups and downs for sure. And Katie, who is my friend here, has heard a lot of this stuff at Blend, but, it's sometimes it's worth sticking out because things can really turn out well.
Thank you so much for telling your stories this evening. It's been such an amazing group of women and really inspirational. My question for all of you is, how do you actually go about doing the due diligence on the culture? I think all of us have had that experience of talking to folks who work at the company, ex-employees, reading all the websites, the Glassdoor reviews, and we think we know what we're getting ourselves into, and then you show up and it's some combination of what you thought you were going to get and a lot of stuff that you didn't even know about. So to the extent that multiple of you have changed jobs multiple times, what have you done that's actually worked in your favor to actually figure out what you're getting yourself into, and what have been some of the surprises along the way? Thank you.
I feel like for most of the 2 tech jobs that I've gone, even before I interviewed, I do the LinkedIn stalking, which then identifies some person who works there, who then I have multiple conversations with, and try and do some diligence even before I apply to just get a sense. And because at that point, they're not trying to sell you quite as much as to the job. You're just kind of getting a little bit of insight into the company. And then specific for Blend, I did have the luxury, and this is when we were smaller, and actually I think Nima interviewed a lot of people, had the opportunity to interview him and talk with the CEO and kind of push him and ask those questions. And he, which I really liked, was an interviewer that liked to just go for a walk. And so you could kind of get a sense and have a personal conversation with him, and you could kind of see, for me, that the vision that he had for where he wanted to drive the company. But again, I think, if you have the luxury and the ability to talk to people before you apply, you get, I feel, a much better kind of real assessment at that stage.
I'd also say it changes. You could think the culture is one thing, and then you get there, as you said, it's completely different. But even if you get there and you think it's going to be what it is, Blend was a totally different company when I joined 2 years ago. It's totally different now. Some for the better, some, whatever. But I think, I think talking to people as much as possible. In consulting, we had this thing called the airport test. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but as part of the interview training, they would say, when you're interviewing somebody who could join your consulting firm or to your team, they would say, would you spend, if you were delayed in an airport, right? Because consultants are traveling all the time, Monday through Thursday. If you were delayed in the airport, would you spend 3 to 4 hours with them? Would you want to hang out with them? I kind of always took that with me, even after consulting, because I again was lucky to have a bunch of interviewers at Blend who I would totally spend multiple hours in an airport with, just hanging out. So I was pretty lucky for that. And yeah, kind of they stayed my friends throughout the company. So that's what I like to do.
I don't think there's a silver bullet. It's hard to figure that out, especially as the interviewee, because you're going in and you're being asked these questions and you have to sort of show why they should continue progressing you through the process. I think one of the biggest things I'd recommend not being afraid to do is ask to come in for your interview maybe over lunch to see if you can have lunch there while the employees are having lunch, or especially if the hiring manager is someone where maybe you're just not sure yet if this is someone you want to spend a lot of time learning from and working with. Once you've gotten far enough along, ask if you can just have coffee with them or a conversation to talk about some questions and concerns you have. And as much as possible, use your gut to understand when someone's being, or to try to understand when someone's being genuine when you ask about the culture or not. But ask about the culture. You may get a lot of generic responses, but you've met so many hundreds of thousands of people in your life, and you get that gut instinct right away. See if that will lead you down the path. And don't be afraid to ask for more information, to spend some time with people. As a hiring manager, especially once we're excited with someone, we usually see that as a good sign, but we just want you to start now. But I think it's very fair for you to evaluate us as much as you're being evaluated.
Can I say something about that? Be authentic in yourself. Like, I am a mom. I have 2 little kids. When I came to Blend, I knew that there weren't a lot of parents here. I led with that. Like, I don't want you to hire me because I'm a mom or whatever, but know that that's important to me, and you don't have to hide yourself once you get here. So just be authentic and don't hide who you are, and they'll respond to you. You know, so it's a two-way street. This has been so cool. I'm so glad you guys got to hear my colleagues speak tonight. I'm inspired. I hope you are too. But we're hiring. So if you're interested in making a move and working in this great culture and this great cafeteria, this is where we eat lunch and dinner every day, come talk to us. There are volunteers around who work at Blend in Blend Swag, so go find them. They want to talk to you. We want to talk to you. Email us at careers@blend.com. And we have dessert. So grab something sweet, make a new friend. Thank you for being here with us tonight.